by the high rates on these countries and just how broad it was, more than 50 of them?
I wasn't surprised by the average. As you probably remember, I've been guessing it would be in the 15 to 25% range on average. What did surprise me was somewhat the extreme skewing. Here you have Vietnam at 46%, China 34%, and then Brazil, Chile, Colombia down at 10%, Turkey as well. So I think one of the things that people are missing in their analysis is what is the impact of the skewing? And I think it will be several-fold. One, there'll be some reshoring to us, but there will also be a lot of redistribution of products that are now coming from Asia, which will instead come from Latin America, because Asian countries all got hit pretty hard, Latin America much less so. So I think there'll be a transfer of wealth and income from Asia to Latin America. Second thing, I think you will find that while there will be retaliation, I don't think it will be proportionate relative to our economy to the destruction we're doing to theirs. I think these other countries know if they get into a protracted trade war with us, their economies will be totally destroyed. So they're much smaller than we are, and therefore $1 of trade penalty inflicted on them has several times the impact of that same dollar being inflicted on us. So I think
it doesn't really help, though. That doesn't really make us feel better when, you know, the S&P is down 4%. You know, it's taken a pretty big hit. We're down 11.5% off the highs, and now there are questions about the U.S. is going into recession. Do you think he'll negotiate these rates down?
Yeah, I think there's a good chance there will be negotiation, because remember, the whole purpose of reciprocity is if they're high, we'll be high. If they come down, we'll come down. Now, one of the things that was not announced yesterday is how does the formula work? If they bring down a very high tariff on a particular product, what does that do? How do they get their tariffs down? I think we need that shoe to drop. I think we also need the shoe to drop. How will we avoid transshipment? Because you have low tariff countries, some down as low as 10%, versus a Vietnam and China at 46 and 34. They're going to be very tempted to transship product through countries that are at 10%. And that's something we're going to have to guard against, because these exporters are very wily, and if there is a loophole, they will find it.
Yep, that's one reason why we figured the policy would be constructed this way, Wilbur. You know, one story that is a vivid memory for a longtime CNBC viewer is the day you were on with us in 2018, and you brought that can of Campbell's soup, and you said you'd bought it at a 7-Eleven. The price was $1.99. We were talking about aluminum and steel tariffs, and you said, who in the world's going to be bothered by 0.6 of a cent? Could you be that optimistic today?
Well, these are bigger numbers than those. So obviously there's more impact. But I think you raise a very important point. A fair number of the exports that we're worried about coming in from other countries are in fact raw material. And that's something that people don't focus, but many raw materials, especially commodities like copper and iron, trade in a range of more than 10% in a year anyway, without tariffs. So there's some give and take. It's really just, to me, the ones north of, say, 25% that are the really punitive ones. And those are the ones where if those countries have sense, they will highball it to Washington and try to figure out what do they have to do to get it down.
Yeah, the steel's a good example because it has arguably moved the price of the pipe that helps us get oil out of the ground. And so we're seeing tariffs from one sector bleed into others that are quote unquote protected.
Well, that's true, and that always happens because raw materials like steel are quite ubiquitous and they affect everything. But I don't think the price of steel pipe is in itself going to do much damage to the country's desire to pump more oil and gas. I was talking with some people in Midland, Texas, just the other day, and they say the place is abuzz like it hasn't been for a long time.
You know, even if you applaud the president's goal here and his mission is noble. We don't want countries ripping us off. We don't want jobs leaving for China. We don't want empty factories here because we've lost market share. All of that, I mean, that clearly spoke to the electorate, and it's been his policy. The problem is, Secretary Ross, if you have this prolonged market and economic slump, not to mention higher prices because these tariffs are so punitive and so severe, doesn't that just negate what he's trying to do to begin with, his entire goal?
Well, I would have frankly preferred if there were a gradual way that they were introduced, because while I have no doubt that factories will relocate, in many cases that may take a year or even more than a year, a couple of years. So I would have just as soon seen, particularly on the extreme one, a graduated thing, something in 6 months, something in 12 months. That would also spread and reduce the ultimate impact near term on the economy, and I think would correspond better to the realities of reshoring. But it's not going to take forever. You saw last time how Vietnam, strangely enough, became a huge beneficiary of the punitive tariffs we put in on China, and Mexico was the other huge beneficiary. Well, this time Vietnam won't be, but Mexico very likely will be, and the president has made clear that he'll give them more favorable treatment if they really deal seriously with the cartels and the fentanyl. So that's what I meant when, and those, to the degree that production does shift to a place like Mexico, that will help because it will mean the full 46% from Vietnam and the full 34% from China won't really hit us. So you'll have things being offset. And I think where that'll be particularly true is in the apparel and footwear industries. China, Vietnam, and Mexico already are the big players there. And that's not such a capital-intensive activity. There's plenty of sewing machines around. So I think that's a sector that could be transferred out of China and Vietnam very, very quickly. And a lot of it's already been underway.
We'll see if that speeds up. Wilbur Ross, it was great to have you today. Thank you, as someone who's been in the room and had these discussions with the Trump administration 1.0, former Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.